is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Duran Martinez in for Steve today. 888-900-9966. 1-888-900-9966. If you'd like to join the conversation today. Senior Turkish official says authorities flagged one of the suicide bombers in the Paris attacks to their French counterparts in 2014, but received no response. The official says Turkish authorities identified Omar Ismail Mostefi as possible terrorist suspect in October 2014, notified French authorities in December of 2014, and again in June of 2015. The official says Turkey received no response from France until the Paris attacks when it requested information on Mostefi. Paris prosecutor's office says that he had been flagged as having ties to Islamic extremism 5 years ago. Just one day before last week's terror attacks in Paris, the senior Iraqi intelligence officials warned members of the U.S.-led coalition fighting the Islamic State group of imminent assaults by the militant organization. AP has learned that the Iraqi intelligence sent a dispatch saying the group's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, had ordered an attack on coalition countries fighting against them in Iraq and Syria, as well as on Iran and Russia through bombings or other attacks in the days ahead. One governor says he will not be taking any and does not want any of the Syrian refugees in his state. Alabama Governor Robert Bentley says he won't allow Syrian refugees to relocate to his state. Bentley has issued a statement saying, after full consideration of this weekend's attacks of terror on innocent citizens in Paris, I will oppose any attempt to relocate Syrian refugees to Alabama through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. Louisiana's governor has sent a letter to the White House demanding to know how many Syrian refugees have relocated to his state. Of course, Governor Snyder putting a hold on the welcoming of such refugees as well here in Michigan. The world's top industrial and developing nations are set to outline their coordinated response to the latest terror attacks in Paris. The leaders of the group of 20 leading rich and developing nations are wrapping up their two-day summit in Turkey against the backdrop of heavy French bombardment in the Islamic State's stronghold in Iraq. Obama is meeting on the sidelines of the summit with the leaders of Britain, Germany, and Italy, as well as France's foreign minister. A Palestinian health official says 2 Palestinians have been killed and 3 have been wounded in clashes with Israeli troops in the West Bank. A health ministry spokesman says the Palestinians were killed at dawn today when Israeli troops entered the Kalandia refugee camp. The Israeli military says the troops entered Kalandia to demolish the home of Palestinian who it says shot and killed an Israeli in the West Bank this summer. The army says Palestinians opened fire at the forces who returned fire at the attackers. The military says 3 hits were confirmed. It was unclear if the 3rd Palestinian was killed. Palestinian officials say 1 Palestinian at the scene was taken into Israeli custody. The military says hundreds of Palestinians attacked Israeli forces, throwing firebombs, and rocks. Vigils held at a mosque church for victims of the Paris attacks. A Detroit church and suburban mosque have hosted vigils for victims of the deadly attacks in Paris. People gathered Saturday evening at the Islamic Center of America in Dearborn and St. Anne Parish in southwestern Detroit. Attendees at the mosque vigil gathered around candles arranged to spell humanity. Islamic Center Executive Administrator Qasim Ali tells the Detroit News that the event was held to honor victims of last week's terrorist attacks in Paris and Lebanon. 3 Dearborn residents were among dozens killed in the Thursday attacks in Beirut suburb. The mosque previously held a service for those victims. He says it's time to take some concrete action on the roots of this terror. Dearborn is home to thousands who trace their roots to Lebanon and in the Middle East. Michigan's Republican governor, who has bucked many party leaders for welcoming Syrian refugees, is putting efforts on hold following the deadly attacks in Paris. Governor Rick Snyder said in a statement Sunday that the state is postponing efforts to accept refugees until federal officials fully review security clearances and procedures. Snyder says the Michigan is proud of our rich history of immigration, but that Michigan's priority is protecting the safety of our residents. Several GOP candidates have criticized the Obama administration's plan to accept 10,000 Syrian refugees and urge much greater scrutiny. Officials say Friday's gun and bomb attacks killed at least 129 people. One of the attackers had a Syrian passport, but it wasn't clear whether the passport was fake or real. Reports are saying that it was fake. Appreciate you joining us here. I'm Duran Martinez on the Steve Gruber Show. Just about 13 minutes after the top of the hour. If you'd like to join the conversation today, 888-900-9966. I'd like to get your thoughts today as to what is going on in the state, the country, the world. Phone line's always open to you. Hunters have streamed into Michigan's forests and fields, of course, for the start of firearm deer season yesterday. More than 500,000 are expected to join the annual hunt. Good warm day. Not a lot of deer moving around, although there was some activity, some success yesterday by hunters throughout the state. Of course, the firearm deer season will go through November 30th. A cultural and sporting tradition, but it's also a big economic driver, generating more than $2.3 billion in spending on products and services, including food, lodging, and equipment. And again, big boost, a big economic boost. The hunting and fishing industry here in Michigan, of course, the bow season doesn't quite get all the attention that the firearm deer season does here in Michigan, but numbers between 500 and 600,000 taking to the woods means fuel, means licenses, apparel, food, lodging, all of those things. So take into consideration the impact that sportsmen and women have around here on the state. Just a thought. It's kind of nice also to have gas prices down a little bit, but that said, AAA saying that prices have declined. I expect them to go up. Every time we get the report, they go up. Appreciate you joining us here. Duran Martinez in for Steve Gruber on the Michigan Talk Network.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Duran Martinez, 18 minutes after the top of the hour. Appreciate you joining me here. Before we get to our next guest, going to go to Philip in Flint. Good morning, Philip. Welcome to the Steve Gruber Show.
Good morning, sir. My thought was I've been listening to all these political pundits on the TV over the weekend, and they're all saying we should attack ISIS. And yes, I agree. But the thing is that just defeating ISIS won't eliminate them, because they'll either just rebuild with a new name because they're fanatical, or, and they'll still just keep attacking us. The only way you'll really stop them is to go to where they're forming and to support the country that's there to be a country, to protect and guard and do their own things, so that they don't want to come over here and kill a bunch of us.
Well, I appreciate the call, Philip and Flint. It makes a lot of sense to want to go and weed out the problem that is here, but like any weed, when you get rid of one, others pop up in a different form, in a different way. And I don't think we're going to win over the mentality. I don't think we're going to win over the mentality and the mindset to destroy something that's opposite of what they are. And all the political correctness in the world, being nice and accepting, is not going to do any good either. My thoughts on that, and I'll quote James Woods here in a little bit, but we're first going to go to our guest, Devon Herrick, a preeminent expert in 21st century medicine, including the evolution of internet-based medicine, consumer-driven healthcare, and key changes in the global health market. Pain reliever insurance scam. Welcome, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely appreciate you joining us here. The pain reliever scam. It's funny because over the weekend we had my girlfriend and I had to go get a prescription filled, and one of the prescriptions was for a topical solution for something very minor, and it was like $60 for this little tube. And he says, yeah, it's just the prices just keep going up and up and up. And we're seeing a lot of costs in just the most basic of things. Now, a lot of things rising. Why is that?
Well, that's a good question for a lot of folks at your insurance company and your drug plan would love to have the answer. But I think it ultimately boils down to a lack of competition. And maybe a little bit of gall on the part of some of these firms that are selling older medications that, in fact, are generic and should have tons of competition and low prices. But they see an opportunity to jack the price up because maybe no one else is making it, and they know the FDA cannot respond quickly enough to approve a new application for a competitor.
When it's funny that you bring that up because when I look at, and maybe it's all the same manufacturer, just putting it in a different form. When you can go to over the counter, when you can get a acid reflux, let's say, pill, a Zantac or a Pepcid or something of the like, and then you have the store brand, which pretty much has the same ingredients. Are they all being made by the same company, and does that company have that market cornered to where it can label itself that way?
Well, when it comes to the over-the-counter drugs, I know there are numerous producers, and some of these are not even local. Many are foreign entities and foreign companies. But when it comes to generic drugs, which is where we see most of the price increase, we have a lot of competition. The problem is that the FDA has a backlog of nearly 4,000 different applications of companies saying, we want to produce generic drugs. They just can't process them fast enough. And let's say that you're a hedge fund manager. This happened last August. A former hedge fund manager who was the CEO of a small drug company. Yeah, and I think he went on the lookout for what drugs are old, cheap, one that I could buy cheaply that have little competition, so I see an opportunity to jack prices up. Well, this hedge fund manager did that and raised the price of a drug from $15 to $750 a pill. Now, is that calculated? Yeah, I think it was calculated.
It would seem it's calculated, and are there rules against that, or is it just a market where you're able to do this and able to control because you have cornered and owned the market, so to speak?
Well, there are no rules against that. Generic drugs are a competitive market. They face, in theory, unlimited competition. But the reality is that if you're the only one or two drugs or companies making that drug, maybe it's an old drug that doctors don't prescribe very often. If it's an old drug and only one or two companies make it just because it's not popular, let's say a company buys that drug cheaply from the original manufacturer and thinks, if I raise the price, I bet the other competitor won't try to fight me. I bet they'll raise theirs too. But that gets to another issue, I think, that's really driving some of this. I mean, we've talked about the economics, but increasingly, with the blessing of the Health and Human Services, the U.S. government, the FDA and Congress over the last 2 decades has really encouraged drug makers to seek out and do research on rare diseases, orphan drugs, for example, orphan diseases. And so now a third of all of our drug spending nationally is on a very, very, very small group of drugs commonly known as specialty drugs. These can be for cancer, these can be for rheumatoid arthritis. They're oftentimes derived from living substances or hard to produce. And so 1% of drugs that we use or that are prescribed are now represent one-third of all drug spending. So, now, of course, the increases that we've talked about are not specialty drugs. But if you're a drug maker and you see this one minuscule group commanding huge prices, you think, well, what can I do to get in on that? Do I do research and find a biologic, or do I just try to take an old drug for parasites like was done back in August and pretend like it's a specialty drug and jack the price up? So I think there's a little bit of that going on too.
All right, Devon Herrick, appreciate your information and more news on the uprising cost of basic drugs here in America. Thank you so much for joining us. The Steve Gruber Show, Duran Martinez on the Michigan Talk Network.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values. Steve Gruber with Midwestern common sense.
Monday. Why do you torture me so? Hopefully everybody's recovering from the global warming of yesterday. The warm temperatures mid-November, halfway through the month, as we progress towards the winter months here in Michigan. The winter months pretty much all over the country, but it was a nice reprieve to a degree. It would have been better if it wasn't opening day of firearm deer season. Okay, my bow season already has been a little warm, but is it global warming issues, or is it just, as I have put it since day one, the natural progression of the Earth knowing far more than what we could ever possibly understand? It knows how to fix itself. Okay, it's been around for billions of years, long before we got here and decided that we knew everything. Just a thought. Liz Peek will be joining us here, a columnist for FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times. The Cultimate Crusade would make Big Brother proud. The global warming charade continues. And one person that could tell us more is Liz Peek joining us. Yes, Alex? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning. How are you?
Good. I'm somewhat disconnected, believe it or not, in this instant information society. But it is a Monday too. I can just look and say it's all Monday's fault. Exactly.
Who can really get it together Monday morning? Not me.
Not me. No. So please tell me, global warming, is it to blame for 60 degrees in Michigan? I sarcasm, Liz.
Honestly, who knows? But I knew that as we approached the Paris climate gathering, which is going to start in the beginning of December, that there would be a steady drumbeat of alarms and attacks on industry and so forth, heralding the crisis that they're trying to create about global warming. And, it's not just something that everyone should sort of look at a distance. The problem is this is really going to begin to impact Americans' lives. It's going to drive up energy costs here, et cetera. Obama has it in his head that the next big legacy box to be checked is concluding a global climate agreement, and that's what he's going to be pushing for. Now, the attacks in Paris may undermine that ambition because it's not clear that Paris will be ready to receive a giant worldwide confab 2 weeks from now. I think that's really an interesting development. But what's going on here, meanwhile, is really contentious and alarming. The most recent salvo, one of the things I've written about that you're referring to, is the Attorney General in New York investigating ExxonMobil for not having warned investors and the public aggressively enough about the risks of climate change. And I really call your attention to two things. One is they're going back, asking for documents, internal emails, etc., going back to the 1970s, when this wasn't even a blip on the investor or public radar screen. And secondly, they're challenging not, again, that ExxonMobil may be adding to carbon emissions and thereby causing a problem, but rather they're investigating them for funding scientists who disagree with the notion that humanity is causing global warming, and basically threatening to charge them millions of dollars for not basically sort of falling in line with the government's credo on this topic. I mean, it really is sort of Orwellian, and it is really, to me, sort of a new, sort of frightening chapter on how dissent is being stamped out. And this is just one area, but this is an egregious area. I mean, can you imagine telling, and by the way, I said in my piece, the best argument ExxonMobil has is that they have committed $33 billion to future exploration and development projects around the world. What company would do that if they felt that climate change was really going to endanger their basic business model? They know otherwise. They know that no matter how much money goes into, courtesy of your government, solar panels and wind farms, oil and gas is basically the energy that we're going to be relying on, not just in the developed world, but also in the developing worlds like India, where they are desperate for development. So, I mean, it's just, I think it's really kind of frightening because people are not aware of how this is insidiously undermining our very prosperous energy industries and our advantage when it comes to low energy costs in this country.
Liz Peek is our guest here. Liz, I look at this and I'm kind of wondering how they can single out ExxonMobil first and foremost, how they're not pointing fingers at India, at China, who completely go against all forms of any. We've been changing things as a kid. I remember in the 70s how newer and better things were implemented to help the environment. Okay, but now they're targeting ExxonMobil as if Joseph Hazelwood was captaining the whole ship in general.
Yeah, of course, China today, something you don't read much about, but China is responsible for twice as much carbon emissions into the atmosphere as the U.S., and, of course, growing very rapidly. In fact, recently there was an article in the papers about the fact that there are 141 new coal-fired plants starting up in China this year. The idea that Obama got together with President Xi, the president of Xi in China, and made or coerced China into agreeing to cap carbon emissions is just utter nonsense. The Chinese have a really dire problem. You cannot see across the street in Beijing or in Shanghai. Literally, that is true. Mm-hmm. Flights are canceled. School is canceled repeatedly. All kinds of things because their pollution is so ghastly. And, in fact, there are Chinese scientists warning that their crops may begin to fail because there's such awful pollution that the sun doesn't literally get to the ground. So China has a very good reason to try and stem the pollution in that country. Has nothing to do with jawboning from President Obama, though he is excited that he was there at the creation, I guess. But anyway, sure. That is an issue, and look, the climate zealots can attack U.S. industry. They can't really attack China's industry. But what's so infuriating to me is that rather than having a president that is celebrating the fact that the U.S. actually can stage a comeback in manufacturing, mainly because our cost of energy is so low, which is why German companies are coming here, et cetera. Instead, we're hobbling our energy industries, and it makes me crazy.
Absolutely. Liz Peek, appreciate you joining us here. The opening of more coal plants in China, well, another one here in Michigan gets closed, and we're not sticking with it because we have someone in office that says, the brown shirts of the EPA are the ones doing all the work to keep these emissions down, right? To keep us all safe.
Yeah. I hope you feel safer today.
Nah, well, yeah, great, thanks. It's Monday, Liz. It's Monday.
There you go.
Stick with it. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Absolutely. Liz Peek joining us here on the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Duran Martinez. 888-900-9966 to join the conversation on the Michigan Talk Network.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty. Filling in for Steve Gruber, here's Duran Martinez.
Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Duran Martinez on the Michigan Talk Network. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966 if you'd like to join the conversation with us here today. Coming out of Worcester, Mass., FBI spokeswoman says some weapons have gone missing following a break-in at an Army Reserve Center in central Massachusetts. Kristen Satera says the Boston FBI became aware of the break-in at the Lincoln Army Reserve Center in Worcester. I know I'm always told not to try and pronounce things the way they do, but I'm going to do it anyway. Worcester. On Sunday, she says terrorism is not suspected. Authorities hadn't yet determined when the break-in occurred or exactly how many weapons were actually stolen. Satera says that every effort will be made to recover these weapons immediately. Descriptions of the missing weapons have been entered into the National Crime Information Center, an online database searchable by law enforcement. The break-in was first made public during a press conference with the Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. State police deferred the questions to the FBI. So some stuff, some firearms coming up missing from an armory in Massachusetts. Also in Massachusetts, this time coming out of Salem, lawyers in the trial of a Massachusetts teenager accused of killing his high school math teacher plan to make opening statements today. Philip Chisholm is charged in the October 2013 rape and slaying of Colleen Ritzer. The body of the 24-year-old teacher at Danvers High School, north of Boston, was found near the school. Her throat had been slit. Chisholm was 14 at the time, now 16. He's being tried as an adult in the Essex Superior Court in Salem. Jury selection was suspended several weeks while the judge considered Chisholm's mental competency before finding the teenager competent to understand the court proceedings and assist with his defense. Chisholm's lawyers have suggested they will use mental health defense and argue he isn't criminally responsible for the teacher's death. Wondering now how much the mentally unstable, the mental health issue is going to be used by lawyers as a way to get their clients out of taking responsibility for their actions. I'm not saying that this student in question that cut the throat of a teacher that was 24 years old while he was at the age of 14, I don't think anybody that is capable of that crime is mentally stable. But I think lowering the standards for mental health should not be done. Okay, using it as a defense when possibly shouldn't be. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that coming in here, unfortunately. When there are some real mental health issues out there, this is going to be a defense for some to take that do not have the business of using it. A man charged in several freeway shootings in Metro Phoenix is asking a judge to allow him to be released from jail because he has an alibi. Sure, we'll let you go. You're at the Burger King? Oh, okay. No problem. Lawyers for Leslie Merritt Jr. are expected to call family members to testify at a hearing this afternoon and to present phone records. The attorneys say prove Merritt wasn't near the crime scenes. No one was seriously injured after 8 cars were hit with bullets and 3 were struck with projectiles such as BBs or pellets, mostly along Interstate 10. Mental health. the defense on that. I'm kidding. 10 minutes away from the top of the hour, Duran Martinez here on the Steve Gruber Show, 888-900-9966. Just one day before terror attacks last week in Paris, senior Iraqi intelligence officials warned members of the U.S.-led coalition fighting the Islamic State group of imminent assaults by the militant organization. The Associated Press learned that Iraqi intelligence sent a dispatch saying the group's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, had ordered an attack on coalition countries fighting against them in Iraq and Syria, as well as on Iran and Russia through bombings or other attacks in the days ahead. Those are warnings being taken very seriously, of course, especially after the incident, the attacks, the brutal attacks in France that took place over the weekend at a concert venue, attacks that were somewhat averted at a sporting arena. They somehow deterred the attacker from getting in the soccer stadium, to which he turned his bomb on himself, on others, unsuspecting innocents during that time. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. It is 9 minutes away from the top of the hour. I'm Duran Martinez. This is the Steve Gruber Show. Would love to have you join the conversation today, either on Facebook. Look for the Steve Gruber Show. Very easy to find as well. Also, if you'd like to find out what I'm up to, Facebook.com/Wild Michigan. 2-hour outdoors radio program that goes on every weekend here, Saturday, Sunday on the Michigan Talk Network. We'll talk a little hunting, a little fishing, maybe a little bit about guns. Never know what we're going to talk about, but it is related to the outdoors. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Duran Martinez on the Michigan Talk Network.